Hey, Johnson, how are you doing?
Well, Karen, how are you?
Good. I wanted to introduce you, everyone, to my dear friend and colleague and co-shaman and Johnson Chong. And he's written a book called Sage Sapien, From Karma to Dharma. And it's about his life journey. So, and I love this statement, and you gave it to me, so I feel totally free to use this. A self proclaimed first generation gay Asian American born in NYC to conservative refugee parents. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of karma to change into Dharma. And you
Yeah,
did it. I mean, you wrote the book and you've walked the walk and talked the talk, and it's pretty fantastic.
it's been an interesting journey. I think growing up, I didn't realize what was happening in the moment, but I think a lot of healing work and awakening work, as you go, it's all in retrospect. And you look back and you go, oh, wow. When abuse is happening, especially because my parents are products of communism and having to flee for their lives and then seeking asylum in the States and coming off of, they were from the southern part of China, but Jimmy Carter had that Refugee Act in 1980.
Mm.
And so they kind of tagged along with the Vietnamese boat people. And my mother was very clever to uh, say, "Hey, if I go back because they swam to Hong Kong because they
Wow.
kept getting caught and it was a life or death situation." So carrying all of that. Oh, actually, there's a mystical experience that motivated my mother. She went to see a seer, which is also illegal at the time because any superstition or religious practices was deemed as it was just wasn't allowed by the communist state at the time. And so she had to pretend she was this relative of the seer, and she described him as this man who had a very big head and a very small body, and he was disabled. He couldn't quite walk. He used crutches, and this man said, you're going to live in a faraway land. You're going to have three children, two boys and one girl, and you're going to be this. You're going to work very hard, and you're going to be the black sheep of the family, and no one will ever understand you. And so this became like a karmic, self-fulfilling prophecy for my mother because she really held this prophecy to heart, and so she did become, compared to her standards of being very poor in the village, worked really hard, got a lot, moved to America, sought asylum, had two boys and a girl. And then there was that black sheep energy of this self-fulfilling rejection where she felt like no one in her family got her, right? And that kind of trickled down into me as well. So growing up, I remember feeling this theme of rejection of, oh, my parents don't get me, they won't get me, no one around me will ever get me. And then at the same time, there's the karmic residue of my parents being rejected from China. It's
Mm.
not like they wanted to come and leave all their family behind. They did it because they would die. So this theme of rejection has always followed me in my field, and I wasn't able to articulate it so much until I started doing more of the spiritual work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened.
Wow, it's an amazing journey. And you didn't really even come out to your parents. I think you said 28.
26, I came out to them
26, yeah.
officially.
So
Yes.
yeah, so
Yeah.
you were carrying a lot of things and holding a lot.
I made a promise to myself. I said, I'm not going to come out to them till they die. This was when I was a teenager because there was this cultural baggage, especially when you grow up in America as bicultural. There is, first off, there's this clash of expectations from the East, which is very much focused on, and this is the story, right, from Jaguar. This is the story you've constructed for yourself, for myself anyway, of, well, it's so focused on the nuclear family. It's so focused on the we have to be tribal and we have to stay together. We do everything to sacrifice our needs for the family's needs first. And then in American education, we're learning about individualism, uniqueness, stand up for yourself. It was very contrasting when you're growing up with these
Yeah.
two cultures. And so I used to come home And I would say things, I remember from, English literature class, I would say things like, oh, mom, I don't really, you're a kid, so you say these things, mom, I don't really need you. And you didn't make me. I'm like, you didn't make me who I am. I'm a self-starter. I made myself the way that I am today. And of course, that's very offensive to someone of Eastern culture, because you are a product of all of your ancestors and all of the hurt and the pain and the wounds from, because growing up we had a family altar, and you have to make your offerings every day to the ancestral altar to honor the fact that you have these ancestors who have died for you to be here, especially there's so much war and betrayal in my family line. And so
And it kind of turns out they're right. I mean, when you get into
it
shamanic
is, yeah.
practices, it is kind of right. We kind of are, and they kind of all whisper in our ears until we do that kind of shamanic work to allow them to
Yeah.
go, to release.
And I think it was a full circle moment for me coming back to shamanism, and then realizing that a lot of practices that, though my parents are Confucian Buddhists, that there are a lot of similarities growing up in a lot of, because we did a lot of rituals. There are a lot of Chinese immigrants or refugees. They might go into one band camp. One camp would be, I'm just going to Americanize and I'm going to leave my culture behind, and I'm only going to raise my kids speaking English. And then the other is, which my parents fell into, they're gonna learn everything about Chinese values. They're gonna do everything, and they're gonna go to Chinese school every Sunday and learn about their culture and learn how to read and write. And I found that to be quite oppressive for me, because I was exposed more to American culture growing up. I didn't even actually speak English until I was about 4 or 5, even though I was born in America, because I was around Chinese so much. Like, that's how much they were instilling Eastern values. And it just became this clash, because now I understand from an ancestral shamanic point of view what they were trying to say. They just had their human stuff that was layering over it that made it a bit off-putting when I was growing up, plus what we were learning in school. So it was just a confusing time.
Yeah, it had to be tremendously confusing. And then so then you came out and you found yourself and you wrote this book, From Karma to Dharma, and you've done all this spiritual work. And now you have this great class where you're teaching shamanic breath work. And so, people are familiar with breath work and pranayama and different things. And so tell us about shamanic breath work.
So I know this is a term that's coined by various people, and they all probably approach it from different ways. And my journey really started with theater school. And in theater school, when I was 19, we were doing a lot of breath work, but it was more for performance training. It was more for disentangling our own psychological stories within ourselves so that we can become blank slates to create these characters. So it was more about a mind-body connection. And we did a lot of yawning breath. We did a lot of Linklater voice work. And Kristen Linklater she does a lot of chakra work actually in her voice work. And so our voice teachers we would explore chakras through our voice as actors. And we don't really fully understand the significance of this as these young, actors in training. And this is what you do all day in conservatory. You don't do anything else but that. you breathe, you perform, you analyze your script, you learn about truth, you learn about presence. Like it's like Harry Potter's, School of Wizardry for actors, right?
Yeah.
And I started having these experiences, and later the term was, these Kundalini experiences through these breath experiences. And then yoga was part of our curriculum. And then yoga became my first gateway into the realm of the spirit, but more from a mind-body control. And I think, and as one of my teachers puts it, the path of the yogi is very much the path of discipline. It's very structured. And the yogic pranayama, which a lot of people are familiar with, you have set breath counts, you do it this many repetitions for this many minutes. It's very much in a frame. And what it's designed to do is to, if we're talking about yin and yang, it's to bring this order, right? We talk about the law of the universe is that it's always looking to create order. It's bringing order into the raw, which is the Shakti. It's the unpotentiated, wild forest, mama, earth energy that's just, it doesn't grow in a straight line. And the yogic way is very much about cultivating the shadow and bringing it up. And then the shamanic way is a bit more top down. It's more, I'm going to commune with spirit through the medicine wheel. I'm going to listen to that which is greater than myself, but also I realize it is myself too. But it's more of me personifying this guidance from outside in. And so you have the rise up from the bottom up from the yogic, and then you have the top down from the shamanic. And for a long time, you know, in the path of the yogis, I was very much like, this is my path. This is all I'm doing for the rest of my life. I even left, you know, acting to just teach yoga and you know, body work and just do that work. It was like structure. I love structure. And then I discovered shamanic practices in 2015. And that became a little frightening for me because all of a sudden, these other types of experiences that were not necessarily embodied within me, because all my yogic Kundalini experiences were very much self-initiated, felt like it was within, I could contain it. Then these shamanic experiences were like massive waves pouring in. I'm like, what is that? Who's speaking to me? What am I seeing? And it was just like a lightning bolt coming down from the sky. And I very much, you know, I would close the door on that every now and again. And my first foray into initiation was through the Muneki, and then going to Peru, and then eventually Four Winds after that. And so slowly I started to reintroduce the world of ceremony back into my life. And in that, the integration of the structure and then the flow of approaching breath work, how it looks is that, you know, I start a session first with this control, right? It satiates the left brain, the monkey mind. And then we might start using and borrowing from the yogic and the Kundalini lineage, using different mudras to stimulate energy. And so that's what the limited mind can like grasp onto. And then all of a sudden something takes over, because we've also opened sacred space and added in the medicine wheel and the universal wisdom principles of shamanism. And then something starts to come down in the way of guidance, whether it's a visual or it's a felt sense or some sort of energetic awakening. And while we're doing that, then we're adding in the psycho-spiritual inquiry of, well, if we're, let's say, working on forgiveness, let's say, of using my own life example of my mother and my father for, you know, the abuse that they, not willingly, but I think it was just, right, of their, just exploded out of them, to forgive that, right? So then asking questions, right? A lot of it is a psychodrama that we hold in our head. So when you have energy going, you're also tapping into this higher wisdom that's just innately around us and being attuned to that. And then you're also working on the psyche. And so that's kind of how we approach it. We integrate the path of the yogi, the universal wisdom principles of shamanism, and then there's that psychological element, or a psyche inspired element of somatic inquiry, of, you know, where does that story live in your cellular, you know. And then we do talk about chakras, and then we kind of look at it from different angles. So here's the yogic way, which is quite structured. Here's a more shamanic way, and then the shamanic way really is your way. It's, you know, the yogic way is like, you know, root chakra is red, but maybe for you, as you're communing with spirit shows you it's brown, you know. So then that is your direct personal communication with spirit, and that is what you work with, right?
So you're doing this in the structure of breathing, which is like, show a little bit of the breathing. Is it like the short kind of making sure you, yeah, like maybe demonstrate.
There's various breaths that we do. So for example, and some of the movements were from the Himalayan yogis, and then it kind of turned into something else when I would sit there and work with them, and then it would go into something else. So I'll just have to back up here away from my screen. So for example, there's a cat-cow movement that is very well known in yoga, where you do this all fours thing, where it's
Oh, yeah.
And that's to stimulate the energy through the spine and through the first three chakras, activating the organs. And then there's various things that you can do seated, right? And as I was, sitting and breathing and connecting with spirit, sometimes mudras would start to happen. And so there's, for example, this expansion of the fingers where the arms come up and we go into eagle. So, I mean, this isn't traditional at all, but then we add to the cat-cow and we add wings. And then if you allow spirit to come over, all of a sudden it becomes something else a bit more fluid that you couldn't have created when you're doing something so structured. Because my teachers would be like, okay, you're here for 5 minutes, just cat-cow like this. So it's just do, 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 do. And then if you allow spirit to then, it's kind of like when you're on stage performing and here's your script and it's like you're doing this show day in and day out, you're saying the same words, and then one night something happens because someone says something in the audience, or people react in a different way, the other actor you're playing off of is giving you something else, and all of a sudden it just changes and then you're doing this instead. And that's more of the shamanic influences. It's a top down. Another instance would be we do a lot of breath of fire. So if we're, let's say we're just sitting and we're going into a moon breath where we inhale to the left, exhale to the right, which is very yogic, right? And then we allow that to go and we add all of our breath retentions, all very standard yogic pranayama. And then we let that go and then we start inquiring and we're gridding. Sometimes we'll use sacred geometrical shapes to grid energy up through the body. So because the way of shamanism is very much about the symbols, and it's all about, it's like the waking dream. So if the two sit bones, which carry so much energetic potential, are right here, and we plug it up to the crown of the head, that creates an upward triangle. So universally, the theme of upward triangle is ascension. It's connecting to higher self, higher purpose. It's a fire energy, right? And so everyone's going to tap into the collective meaning of that word or the shape rather, and they're going to feel what that is. And that will do something to first the physical. People might twitch or they might go, because they're feeling the triangle and investigating that energy. And this is all in the mind, right? And then eventually, because the breath is so, it's the breath of fire.
So you're breathing for a while. I mean, breath of fire, you're taking how many breaths or how many minutes? You're talking doing it for like an extended time.
Yeah. And
then like how long? Do you time it or does everybody, how do you flow with that?
Yeah. Yeah. So then that energy starts to inform and inspire a different experience. So you might start to take mudras and you're not necessarily sitting in like this monastic sense of like, oh, I'm sitting here meditating, but you might start to go into what I call a scale. And this is something that came to me when I was in India with one of my teachers, where I would just start rocking and I would start with the breath and you almost go into a trance, and while you're doing this, there are a lot of physiological reasons why this is beneficial for the spine. I mean, if you start to analyze it, right? And people like to break things apart. And one of the reasons is, when you're rocking, the nervous system is getting softer. It's soothing for the parasympathetic. You see this with autistic children; they naturally just rock, right? And so when you're drumming in a circle, you're sometimes rocking, you're in trance, right? You see this across all traditions. There's this thing, and that just started to happen, and that was more, happening with my direct experience of connecting to something larger, with the greater intelligence that is at play, and everyone's going to have their own unique expression of that, and that's really fun because the training is to train facilitators, and these are my expressions of how things flow through after we go through this incremental pathway of structure, and then to see what comes down and expresses through them, that's going to be super exciting.
I love it. Yeah, I know someone who does does belly dancing, a very good one, but she's adapted the 4 archetypes into it. Serpent, jaguar, hummingbird, eagle, and the movements. And it's so beautiful to actually, like you say, bring that down and bring down those archetypes and bring them in. So for anybody that doesn't know, eagle is a very powerful archetype for those of us in the Andean tradition. Yeah, and embodying shamanism is someone said once that we awaken the shaman within, and we become that person of wisdom, so that we can walk a little differently in the world. And so that's sort of what you're doing for people, is you're helping them to deal with things and move differently in the world and access their inner shaman. And the course that you have takes how long? It's
It's
kind of
an
long.
8-week program.
And how long are the sessions? And you do it
So
on
we
Zoom.
have so we have live workshops every week. So those are 2 or 2.5 hours. But then there's
Wow.
also a whole back end of homework that they have to do. So every 3 or 4 days, they get a new practice. And so because it is a program geared towards facilitators, we have various types of people, like a doula, a functional medicine person, a bunch of yoga teachers, some Reiki people, and they're all looking to integrate an embodiment practice into something they already do. And so every sequence that they learn and they practice, they then have to teach in these student practice led sessions. And there's 2 of them every week. So it's quite hands-on. And then the next block of 3 or 4 days, they get a new practice. And then in between, they have all these videos that are about certain principles, spiritual principles. For example, like chakras is a big topic. We talked a little bit about bija mantras, we talk about mudras, we talk about the yogic way, the shamanic way. We talk about the medicine wheel, certain universal wisdom principles like Aini, sacred space. And then some other yogic principles would be Kundalini from that perspective. Like what do the yogis say about the awakening of Kundalini? And then really, and a lot of other stuff as well. And then we throw in some sacred geometry, which is more, a Kabbalistic influence. So it's really this integration and synthesis of various traditions. And it's not geared to make someone like, oh yeah, this is exactly how you're going to do it, but that it's really to give a framework to allow these facilitators to find their own voice in transmitting an embodiment practice, because everyone's a different frequency. So some people may resonate with this facilitator because they have more of this natural nurturing energy, so they go to them for that. And that's really what we want to highlight then. And then finding different colors so they can express other parts of themselves. And then a big part is languaging. So we work with a 6-part cueing system, level 1 and level 2 being more logistical. You can think of those directions as south directions, as more like, when you're cueing, sometimes with efficiency of words, you can set up, kind of like, okay, lift your tray tables and put them back up, right? And the seat up, right? When the landing takeoff thing happens, those are level 1 and 2 cues. They're logistical. Then we get to level 3 cues. It's more somatic. So we can look at that as more of the West. When we're set up, we're now doing this breath work and this movement. The jaguar cue is tracking. It's like, what's there? What's happening in the belly button? Ooh, what's that sensation? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it old? Is it new? Is it recent? Is it yours? Is it not yours? Where is it coming from? Is it painful? Is it pleasurable? Right? And so it's the polarity, and you're exploring what that is in the mental, emotional. And then when you get to north, then you're like, you're probably off in some space like, woo. Yeah. And your arms, you're not following the structure anymore. You're really allowing destiny to pull you into it's your higher self beckoning to you. Hey, let's explore what the potential is. And then those questions might be more, there are still questions there. So those are more level 4, 5, and 6 cues are more inspirational. That they can draw from quotes, they can draw from personal story, but just adding enough. They might be empowerment words. They might be archetypal sounds that you just create to inspire the class or the client to just all of a sudden it clicks them into place. And then an eagle, it's just like, need words, that's a little bit more advanced. The group needs to have, been with you for, some time before you can just do a session with no words because there's a story. There's no story. So it's just everyone's just doing their thing, and it's just spirits coming, and it's a spontaneous thing. And so it's yeah, it's a sequential path, and we don't really do so much of the eagle stuff. We do a little bit of north, but we don't do so much eagle stuff in level 1, just because we want to get the foundational. It's just like exactly how the medicine wheel
Yeah, I
works.
love it. I love it. And I think, part of the thing with breath work and why it's so important is a lot of times we forget to breathe.
Yeah.
Like we get kind of shut down and closed up. And so we're not really inhaling, exhaling to the extent that we can. And if we really want to move energy, like if we want to move heavy energy that's stored in our liposomes or stored in our body and it takes a lot of breathing. It takes some time of breathing and some practice and different ways of breathing that will help us ultimately to shift energy, like even some of the core wounds that we talk about, abandonment, abuse, betrayal, to be able to move through some of those things with breathing is pretty powerful.
Yeah, for sure. It's crucial. And I think any performer knows this because you do a lot of work in training your diaphragm, and actors, singers, dancers, there you do. If you went to a conservatory training, you're kind of, you have a head start in a way because you do classes on it, you do anatomy of the ribs
Mhm.
and the diaphragm, and from a more technical angle. It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
really bring in the spiritual, but that's the foundational. And I think that is what the yogic structure provides, because it's quite technical. And then we do look at the anatomy of the breath and of the ribs, and then there's all of the left brain benefits of why, when you hold your breath, the kumbhaka, what it does to the nervous system, what it does to the cells when you hold it past 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, what's happening to the immune system and the nitric oxide levels. Like, there's a lot of science.
yeah,
Harvard Medical has done a wonderful study on meditation and breath work and mindfulness, and they have a whole department for it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And they come out with all the time, people can just Google Harvard Medical or even Stanford, and a lot of leading universities do a lot of studies on the benefits of meditating and breath work and what it does. And I mean, the physiological effects are and like there's a lot. And also, it changes the physiology. That's the main thing. It changes the physiology of the brain, right? The thickening of the gray matter in the brain. And we know, from a brain science point of view, that as we age, we lose gray matter. But
hmm
and the cortical thickness is very much tied to someone's memory, like, if the likeliness of Alzheimer's and all of these
yeah,
degenerative diseases, right? And
yeah,
so there are like benefits to, like, there's practical things, and then there's the spiritual element, of course.
yeah,
And we
which
want
is
to,
fantastic. It's nice to have, because we talk about in shamanism our selves being like a Russian nesting doll, the physical self, emotional body, spiritual body. So to have everything kind of flowing together is kind of the goal, I think. Right? We want to have everything on board. We want to have the physical body happy, and we want to have the emotional body releasing, and then the spiritual body, bringing down that beautiful energy. And if you can get all three things, that's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. So this class that you have, I think, is pretty full. So,
it is, so we wanted to have 22, and we have 22
oh, there
master
you go.
architect number. That's the number of the architect, right?
I like it.
The builder. And so we're going to run another one in January. This particular class was geared more because I'm based in Sydney, Australia. So we have people more in Australia, and some people in Asia, Israel, Germany. So it's more on this time zone.
Yeah,
And we'll probably run one in January, late January, for because
perfect.
you guys are in winter, so it's perfect time
Yeah,
to
yeah.
to
So we'll
study.
we'll post your information, and so that you can, and then when you have your class, let me know, and I'll post it again, because I know people are going to really want to sign up for that, especially when after hearing you and hearing how it all works together for spiritual and physical wellness. And I think
Yeah.
it's so important for all of us. And you know, it's a lot of people do breath work, but I love this little shamanic element coming in
Yeah,
too
there's
that
so
I
many
think is,
styles. There's like
yeah.
there's like holotropic, there's rebirthing, there's Wim Hof, there's so many techniques. And I mean there's only so many ways you can breathe, right? And then there's only so many patterns. It's more of what is infused in it. There's some breathwork styles that are more technical, and there's some breathwork styles that are more focused on joyful experiences. I think the shamanic invitation is to explore the light and the shadow, right?
Mm.
So I know that there's some schools out there that do these wonderful classes on joy and on ecstatic breath. And so
Uh-huh.
it's all about this joyful experience, and which is beautiful. I feel that, to make it a little bit more to look at all the directions of the medicine wheel, we also kind of have to look in the basement.
Yeah, I like
Yeah, we
it.
have to go, oh, what's down there? Because,
Right.
we can't just be going straight to joy and bypassing all of this stuff down there.
Yeah, you know, joy is hard. I always say, you know, it's really hard to get to joy and bliss and all the higher emotions when you're carrying like bags of stuff with you,
That's right.
right? So when you cut the cords to all the baggage and look at your baggage and say, oh, huh, how about that? You know, it's when we ignore it, when we
Yeah.
pretend I don't have baggage or I don't want to see that baggage that, you know, it gives us trouble and it's very hard to get to joy at
Yeah.
that, you know, with that. So this is fantastic. So yeah, anything else we should know about shamanic breath work? Anything we missed? Anything I
I
didn't
think
ask
we
you?
I think we talked about quite a bit. I didn't even think we were going to talk about that much.
I loved it. I was like, I want to get everything out of him. I want to find out about everything about this.
Yeah, no, it
Oh
was a lot of
gosh.
fun talking about it, and it's 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 a constant evolution. I feel there's nothing set in stone um, about this work. There's a framework, and I like to see it as, the yogis talk about, there's a yoga sutra, stira sukham asanam, right? And this is very much applied to the yoga postures, and is asana is the yoga postures, but it actually, if you look at the essence of the word, it's the connection to Pachamama. It's the connection to the earth. It's how you're supported by the earth. And so in your physical yoga practice, you're trying to find the most aligned, the most aini way of connecting to your alignment to the earth, right? With just enough tension, not too much tension, right? And then you have stira and sukha. Stira is the firmness, it's the form, it's foundation. And then you have sukham. Sukham is sweetness, it's hummingbird, right? So here you have this integration of the form and the formless. You have structure and flow, and that very much is this style. It's there's a framework. We just learn how to facilitate the beams of the building. Here are the beams of the
Mm-hmm.
building, and then the participants and the clients, they fill it in. They lay the bricks and they paint the walls. They decide where the kitchen goes. Like, they construct the
Yeah.
house or reconstruct it, and that's what's really exciting about this. It's not a dogmatic way, right?
Yeah.
It's a in communion, conversational way of approaching this work.
I love it. It's beautiful. Okay, well, let me know whenever you have it, your next class ready, and I'm going to sign up for it. I want to learn
Oh,
more. So I
fantastic.
know you're a great
Oh,
teacher, and I'm excited to be able to work with you, and it's fun to get to talk to you. I haven't seen you for a while, so but
oh,
I
Karen.
keep up
Oh,
with you on Facebook, so
oh. I don't see posts from that side of the world because of the time zone. It's so
yeah,
strange.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I don't
get
know
you.
what the algorithm. It's just I don't even know. I get so many updates from people on this side of the world, and I lose the on that side of the world. I don't know what's happening with the algorithm. But anyway,
Who knows?
I have
Who
to,
knows anymore? Well, thank
yeah.
you so much, and I really am gonna put all the information about your book, and then whenever you have classes, let us know because I know lots of people be interested. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Karen. I'll
You're
talk to you
welcome.
soon.